What up, everybody? This is the Dr. Football Ultimate Patriots Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dennis Tien. Joining me, as always, the CEO of Hedge Better, Justin Fine. We have a lot of material to cover tonight, a lot happening with the Patriots, a lot happening around the league. Justin, you ready to get into it all, my man?
Very ready. I mean, this is probably the most we've had to talk about in recent memory for an episode. So I'm excited.
I think so, and I do want to apologize that we didn't record last week. I truly believed that I would be able to record an episode when I was on the high seas. I was on a cruise and like the optimist in me thought I would somehow be able to pull this off, but it just literally was not going to happen.
Yeah. Logistics, a wife and 4 kids in a boat, finding time to record a podcast. That's tough.
Yeah.
That's a stretch.
Yeah. It was just not realistic at all. That was just naively optimistic, but we did have an awesome time on the Disney Treasure. For anyone out there with kids and families looking for a vacation, I mean, it's an unbelievable cruise to go a Disney cruise for kids. It's something for every age, which is nice.
Nice. Yeah. That's what I've always liked about the Disney stuff is they cater to the kids, but they also, they don't get thought of as like an adult friendly like trip, but it is. Disney's got a ton for adults. Even just Disney World itself, like you can go.
Absolutely. Like the big thing now is the around the world at Epcot, which a lot of adults like to do, where like people can have a drink at every country in Epcot or something like that. So you're right, 100% right. But it was an amazing cruise. All right, well, let's get to it, because while I was sailing somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, the Patriots hired officially Mike Vrabel as their next head coach, and that really is something we haven't even spoken about yet. So we got to give our takes on the hiring of Vrabel, and then this week they filled out their staff, so we got to get into that. And then there were 4 amazing divisional games this weekend, so we're going to get into that. But let's start with Vrabel, Justin. Let me just give you my take, and then I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are. Obviously, I love the hire. Anyone that's listened to this podcast knows that I wanted the Patriots to do this. I've been talking about it for a long time. I believe I said 9 weeks ago that if you could bring in Vrabel and Josh McDaniels, you would be insane to stick with Gerard Mayo and the previous regime in Foxborough. And so we have now officially landed in that spot where that is all official. And for that, I'm very happy. A couple things I want to mention and see what you think of. One is the speed of it all. I like the fact that they acted quickly. I did want them to have a process, but the more I look at it, and I'm looking around the league, and I see there's still 5 teams without head coaches. Lamb Cohen isn't going to take a job. The Cowboys are interviewing retread Ben Schottenheimer. There's slim pickings out there. Right. So the Patriots got their man. He was the top coach available, I think, and I love that. And then I love the fact that he's a strong personality, and his first assignment is going to be to fix this culture and to turn this team back from being a reality television show, which I think it's been since 2013 when they drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. It's been almost a decade where they've been like a reality TV show. Get them back to being a football team, rebuilding a culture, something Gerard Mayo explicitly failed at. It was probably the biggest failure of his 1 year. Vrabel is the guy that can rebuild that culture. Okay, get this team back on track, back to being a football team and back to winning games. So I love the hire. Justin, what are your thoughts?
Well, going back to, the end of the Belichick era, we talked about it. We said that we knew it was probably going to be Gerard taking over, but I think we said at the time that if we could pick someone to come in and replace Bill, it would have been Vrabel. Like this predates the Mayo era, right? So the fact that now, the Mayo era didn't work out, they had to move on, and they were still able to get Vrabel, to me, I'm thrilled. And I think that's kind of a miracle because, when they passed on Vrabel to go to Mayo, I said to myself, well, they just blew their shot. Some other team's going to hire Vrabel. He's going to go and he's going to have a long, successful tenure somewhere else. And the Patriots missed out on, what could potentially be their best option for a head coach. The fact that we got him a year later, I think we should be thanking our lucky stars. I'm super excited to have him. I think, like you said, he's probably the best option out there for the culture fit for a number of reasons, right? He's a no-nonsense guy. He's all about accountability, responsibility. he's going to restore the Patriots culture that we are so used to and so fond of. I mean, who better than a guy who spent so much time here as a player, winning Super Bowls, building that culture that we reference so much, right? And then rounding it out with his two coordinators, a guy who was here for our Super Bowls, a guy who's had a bunch of success in New England. He developed and worked with, or not developed, but worked with Tom Brady for all those years. And then for a defensive coordinator, you go out and you get a guy from what's arguably the most culture positive franchise in the NFL right now, in the Detroit Lions, right? I think everybody wants a chunk of or a bite of that culture over there. So, you bring in Vrabel, you bring in McDaniels, and then you bring in, is it Williams? You bring
Darrell Williams.
Darrell Williams. I think it's a home run all around. And to your point, right? Like, I like that they acted quickly because they had multiple holes that they were trying to fill. And who knows, some of those guys could have been scooped up by other opportunities elsewhere. So I love it all around. I think it's the perfect combination of people to restore this culture. Something that they've been lacking for a while now.
I agree, Justin. And, you raise a great point with the bringing of the Detroit Lions defensive coordinator in and trying to rebuild the culture with really, emulating a team that has been super successful at building culture. That's a great point. What do you think about the coordinator pick of Josh McDaniels? Are you on board with that? That seemed pretty controversial right now.
I think if the game plan is was inevitably to move on from Alex Van Pelt, I like that you do it sooner rather than later. The last thing I want is Dre to develop under, the majority of, if not his entire rookie contract with the guy, just to have the rug pulled out from underneath him. So I like the fact that you move on to McDaniels now, who has a proven success with quarterbacks. I mean, yes, you can talk about his shortcomings as a head coach, but the guy is a proven offensive coordinator. He's super talented. In terms of what he does. And I think he's going to be great for Drake May. And let's introduce him sooner rather than later into Drake May's development. So I love it. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to bring a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience to the role. And, from what I've been hearing too, it sounds like he's going to be a guy who's not going to try to force the Brady offense onto Drake May. He's going to adapt and implement what he thinks will suit Drake May the best. So I love that too.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're looking at McDaniels, you really have to look at what he did when he didn't have Tom Brady as his quarterback. Yeah. And that's one of the things I like about this hire, because when I look at McDaniels, I see a guy that got the best out of Mac Jones, who is a guy that clearly at this point we can say is a fringe player in the league. And he played at a Pro Bowl level with McDaniels. Cam Newton, his career was over. He had no business being in the league anymore. They won 7 games that year. They got the best out of him. You go back to Matt Castle here. Go back to Jimmy Garoppolo filling in for Brady for 3 games. Jacoby Brissett winning a game. Okay, little data points, sure. Kyle Orton in 2005 in Denver.
Yeah.
You can look at all these places throughout his career, and you can see that Josh McDaniels gets the best, generally speaking, out of the quarterbacks on his roster. Yep. He obviously has not had the massive success as a head coach and maybe even as a coordinator without Tom Brady. Fine, I accept that. But I think he gets the best out of the quarterback. I think he knows how to coach offense.
Yep.
I think he knows how to coach quarterbacks, and that's going to benefit Drake May. And like you said, and I don't think you can understate the importance to this, the stability factor is huge. Having Josh McDaniel here, presumably for the next 3, 4, 5 years, is so critically important to Drake May's development, because the Patriots already dropped the ball on the Drake May start, right? The whole first year was like a total false start. Every coach has been purged. The offensive coordinator is gone. The quarterback's coach is gone. The head coach is gone. The roster was a disaster. So it was all a total fail. So I think having stability now even is more valuable than it would typically be in this situation, because if you don't get stability with this hire, then you're going to be one of those teams that has those young quarterbacks that has 4 coordinators in 4 years or something. Well, that's not going to happen now, most likely, with Josh McDaniels here. And I think that's so valuable.
I think it's super valuable. And, again, bring it back to the culture. You talk about a guy who had been here, was a part of developing the culture, won Super Bowls here. It all really just amounts to me thinking that this is probably the best choice they could have made for some. I mean, obviously there's some guys out there, you in a perfect world, maybe you would have liked to have them as your OC, but those guys aren't like the Ben Johnsons aren't interested in staying OCs, right? They want to move on and be head coaches. So you talk about who's out there and willing and able to do the OC job. I think you got the best fit for your opening.
I agree. And I think that Patriots fans need to realize and I think almost adjust their expectations because, Bill Belichick wasn't Bill Belichick when he came here. He was a distressed asset that had a terrible run in Cleveland and spent a few years rebuilding his career. Very similar to Vrabel, actually. But I think you could say it for both Vrabel and McDaniels that neither one of these guys is perfect. We all acknowledge that. There's questions around Josh McDaniels. Mm-hmm. Mike Vrabel never won a Super Bowl. He didn't win much in the postseason. He built a decent program in Tennessee. Let's not pretend that he's Jimmy Johnson or Bill Belichick. He's not. Those guys don't shake free very often.
Right.
There's a reason why those guys aren't available very often. So you got to take a chance on someone, and you got to make the best possible hire. And I think both for the head coach and for the coordinator, they did that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it was a very smart move. And I love seeing familiar faces around here that know how to win and know how to, frankly, know how to coach.
Yeah. And people are talking about the familiarity like it's a bad thing. And I'm like, why is that being held against the Patriots? Isn't it a good thing that Josh McDaniels has familiarity with the crafts and the organization and the franchise and the culture? Yes. Isn't that a positive?
I would think so. I think that's crazy for anybody who doesn't think that's an asset.
I mean, what would people rather to go and bring in the next, up and coming guy, and then he ends up flopping, and then where are you in a year or two?
Right.
This is you know what I mean? People need to think about all the possible trajectories here, and McDaniels is a safe one, and I think that is valuable.
I think it's I think it's super valuable. And you know what? In the rare occasion that he's not the right guy, which all signs point to him being the right guy, you got a no nonsense head coach that will hopefully do what needs to be done. But I don't think it's ever going to get to that point because I think I think he found the right guy. I think he hit a home run. And it's funny, McDaniels just keeps finding his way back here, and it's almost like it was meant to be. You know what I mean? His home is New England as an offensive coordinator.
He lives in Westwood. He probably lives he's probably sitting 2 or 3 miles from where I'm recording this right now. Yeah. I live right on the Westwood line.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm super glad to have him back in a Patriots hoodie, and I think again it's all positives in my eyes.
It is, and can just one more thing about this whole coaching thing, and I mean, let's just acknowledge too, this has been a total house cleaning for the Patriots. Everyone from Robin Glazier to all the mid-level assistant coaches have pretty much been purged over the last week. So this really is a total new regime.
Right. And it's funny because it's a purge and you're getting something totally new, but it's familiarity, right? So it's you're getting something new, but you're going back to something proven that works, right? So
the other thing I find laughable is the people the last few days who is saying that the Crafts forced Vrabel to hire.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. I think that's crap. That's ridiculous.
I mean, you think Vrabel would come here if this wasn't worked out before he ever signed on? Vrabel had his pick. He could go to pretty much any job that he wanted. There's 5 jobs that are still open. Mike Vrabel's not coming here if he doesn't have control over pretty much everything. And I believe that 100%. We're going to get to Elliott Wolf in a second. Maybe now's the time we should. Mike Vrabel has total control. Maybe not to the level Belichick had when he was here at the end of his run, but Vrabel is in command of this organization. And anyone that doesn't think that Vrabel made the decision on Josh McDaniels, Darrell Williams, getting rid of Robin Glazier, all these assistant coaches or anything, they're absolutely out of their mind.
Agreed. And to add on to that, why would Vrabel ever be against Josh McDaniels? What would he have against him? That just wouldn't make any sense to me. Why wouldn't he want him?
It's just people trying to stir up drama.
Right. Right.
We're so addicted to the drama because it's
Yeah.
all we've had for like 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about Elliot Wolf, Justin, and what his role in the organization going forward is. I mean, to the point we're making, a day after Vrabel gets hired, the Patriots bring in Ryan Croden, who was his right-hand man, one of his personnel guys in Tennessee, left the New York Giants, came to the Patriots to be the quote-unquote assistant GM. I mean, to me, this is a clear indication that Vrabel is the final decision maker in the organization. And you look at what Elliot Wolf's role is going to be moving forward. And let me give you a little hint as to what that's going to be. It's going to be like, okay, I'll take my coffee medium with sugar, and I prefer tea. Elliot Wolf is basically going to be the errand boy for Vrabel in his inner circle. And I really believe that. I don't think he will have any real power. Maybe he'll be doing some scouting. Fine. Mike Vrabel doesn't come here if he has to answer to Elliot Wolf on personnel matters. That's the bottom line.
So I don't disagree with that. I guess I'm curious though, if that's the case, why keep him? Why keep Elliot Wolf?
Well, I have a couple theories about that. One is, maybe he does have a place in the scouting department is the first reason. The second reason is, maybe the Crafts do feel some sense of obligation to him because maybe they feel like he got a raw deal last year with the way the team was so poorly coached. And then can I throw a third one? And I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist out there, but I do think this has a little bit of merit. His father is on the Hall of Fame committee, Ron Wolf. And I just wonder if maybe there's a little bit of politics at play there. Maybe there's a little trepidation about just outright throwing this guy to the curb after 1 year and pissing off the Wolf family.
Yeah. I mean, I would not be shocked if you told me that was factoring into the decision, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, crazier things have happened, right?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about this Vrabel hire, Justin? Any of the big changes that have happened in the last few weeks for this team? Last week, really.
I mean, the last thing I'll say is just I think there was a noticeable difference, watching Vrabel kind of come into the role in terms of like his introduction, just the way he presented himself and carried himself. You can just tell, it's just a completely different, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for? It's just a different persona. It's just a different feel, a different vibe to having him. It's a very noticeable difference.
He exudes like experience. Like
yes.
If even already first baby steps feels like he fits into the role.
Yeah.
Which is not the case for Mayo. Mayo from day one, it was the complete opposite.
Right. Exactly. Gerard Mayo was a little bit of a shock just because he was so contrarian to Belichick when they first brought him in. And this is almost like Vrabel's almost like a middle ground. He's like the middle ground between what you got from Belichick and what you get from Gerard Mayo.
I agreed, but I think he's much closer to the Belichick side, a little closer to the Belichick side, maybe than Mayo was.
I guess I'm talking more so about like in terms of just like personality, right?
Yeah.
Like in terms of personality, like I think you got too little from Bill, you got too much from Gerard, you get just enough with Vrabel.
I hope that's true. I really do. Yeah. I hope he strikes it right. I have to say, I'm kind of curious to see what Gerard Mayo's next step is going to be.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you want to be a head coach in this league, Gerard, nothing that happened in this last year really prevents that from happening again. Like, yeah, he had a false start. It was a mistake. Put in another 5 or 10 years and you can be back in that spot again.
Yeah.
But you got to go coach somewhere. If he really wants it, he's going to go coach somewhere. I'm curious to see if he goes and takes another job this year.
Yeah, and so far, I mean, I don't know, maybe I've just missed it, but I haven't heard any buzz or anything swirling regarding his name and what his next steps are. So, I mean, it at least tells you that, the market doesn't think he's in super high demand either because he didn't have an immediate jump off point either, So.
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. And like, look, if he really wants it, go be a linebacker coach somewhere, man. I mean, if you really want to be a head coach, I think this is a huge litmus test for like where this guy's head is. And I just think it's really interesting. Like, did this guy really want this? Did he really earn it? Did he really pay his dues to get the job he was given? It doesn't feel like it. And if he goes out and just like say gets out of coaching, that's going to really completely validate all of us that question this from day one.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right. Anything else about the Pats and their multiple moves this week?
No, I'm just excited. We got answers to a lot of the questions that we've had for the last few weeks, and I like those answers. We weren't sure what was going to happen, but I'm feeling pretty good about the direction this franchise is heading.
I will say one final little micro take. For the first time in a long time, I feel like this organization is on the right track, and I feel good about the direction.
Me too.
And let me say this. There is absolutely no reason why this team can't be in the playoffs next year if they play their cards right this offseason. The schedule is easy. They have the quarterback. They have the coach. Plug in the pieces, rebuild this offensive line, and you can win 10, 11 games next year. 100% believe that.
I'll take it a step further to say that I'm actually expecting them to be in the playoffs next year. So there you go. I
don't disagree with that, Justin. With this schedule and the quarterback that they have, if he is what we think he is, there's no reason they should not be right there in it.
Yep. And again,
they certainly shouldn't have another 4-win type season. That should be behind them at this point.
Exactly. And there's almost no way that this isn't an improved roster next year between their draft capital, the money available for them to go spend in free agency. I mean, this should almost guaranteed be a better roster than it was too. So you're upgrading the coaches, you're upgrading the roster, and you get another year of development in your potential franchise quarterback. I think you're on the right track.
Agree 1,000%. All right, let's move on to these 4 great divisional round games that we saw this weekend. Let's start take them chronologically, and we'll start with the Chiefs-Texans game, which was the first game, probably the least interesting game of all the 4, to be honest with you. My take on this game is, look, I know everybody's complaining about the referees. I'm not saying that's wrong. I heard a stat today that said that in the last 11 Chiefs playoff games, they have been the lesser penalized team all 11 times. So they're not getting flags. Now, some of that should be credit to them for playing disciplined football because that's part of the game.
Right.
Some of that might be a little bias from the refs. I don't think the Chiefs won this game because of the bad call against Mahomes on the two personal fouls. I think it's time to give the Chiefs credit for what they are. That defense is really good. Mahomes is still Mahomes. Reed is still a damn good coach. Kelsey finds his way to come up big in the postseason, very much like Gronk did at the end of his career. He turns it on in January. And for any other team in the NFL that if they were playing like the Chiefs were playing, I'd say count them out, they're dead. But with this Chiefs team, I'm sorry, they know how to win. You can't count them out. And I just have a funny feeling, man. I mean, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, they're going to be awfully tough to eliminate. I
agree. I mean, just to that point, right now the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, they're, depending on which book you're at, they're hovering right around plus 200 odds. And I got to tell you, that might be the smartest bet and the best value you're going to get in the Chiefs in a long freaking time.
Right.
Because I just think this team, like to your point, is, they're not super flashy. They're not the team that everyone's talking about, but they're proven winners who have been there and done it. They continue to find success time and time again. They continue to do the little things right and have a competitive advantage and an edge. You can say that part of it's could be due to the refs, but look, I mean, I don't think it's just a coincidence. I think this team earns their wins. I think they find ways to win. Yes, maybe sometimes they get some help. But I think this is as solid of a group as you're going to get. And to your point, Kelsey turns the clock back in the playoffs. Mahomes finds a way to make big plays. Like, this defense is still stout. Andy Reid's still at the top of his game. They got the home field advantage. I think they go back to the Super Bowl and they win. But, you talk about the game this past weekend. It went exactly how I thought it was going to go. I mean, I thought it was going to be a boring, lower scoring game. I thought the Texans would keep it kind of close, and I thought the Chiefs would find a way to win at the end. And that's kind of exactly what happened, right? And I just, I think that this team, they're not flashy. They're not like the sexy pick, but they win games, and that's what matters.
Yeah, and like, look, I mean, we've said this one or two other times on this podcast, but that defense does not get enough credit.
No.
And as much as we want to look at that offense and opine about how bad that offense looks and how out of sync they look and how they haven't scored more than 30 points, right? Fine, all true. Their defense is one of the best defenses in the NFL.
Yes.
They are consistent. They are tough to – you have to earn everything against that defense. They are deep. They are consistent at every level. So that's a really good defense. Doesn't defense still win championships? I think even in today's NFL, you could still say that in the way the game is played in the postseason. So for that reason alone, I feel like you can't count them out.
No, you can't. I will say, I don't think it's, I do think there's a chance the Bills could beat them, but am I crazy to say that the winner of that game is winning the Super Bowl? I can't see the Eagles or the Commanders beating either of those teams. Not saying it's impossible, but I mean, you got to think this AFC Championship winner is raising the Lombardi Trophy in a couple of weeks.
I think they'll be the favorite, whichever team wins. I mean, the only thing is Buffalo has struggled to stop the run at times in the way Eagles run the ball. True. I think that will kind of level the playing field this year. But I definitely get your point. I mean, I think this game on the surface is like a 50-50 game, but like I've been watching the Chiefs all year. Probably for the first time, I've been rooting against them this year. I never really rooted against them until they got to the possibility of a three-peat, because that's something Brady never did, right?
Right.
So naturally, being a Patriots fan, now I'm kind of rooting against them. Never been a Chiefs hater until now. But, like the term team of destiny keeps like popping into my head. When you look at the breaks that this Kansas City team got all year long, right up into this week, it's just like team of destiny. It
really is. And you know what? Like the other, you look at it and yes, they've gotten a lot of breaks and you can say they've gotten lucky, but this wasn't like an 11-6, like 10-7 team. Like this team finished 15-2, and one of those losses was the last game of the season when they sat their starters. Like they haven't just been lucky; they've been good. You don't go 15-2 because you're lucky.
Right.
So I think this team has proven time and time again that they know how to win. And you know what? When you got a defense like that, you don't need to put up 30 plus points every week to win games.
Yeah. And look, like you said, the recipe is different than it was earlier on. When the Chiefs won their first title, it was a very different formula. It was a very different recipe. Now it's a totally different recipe. It's a lot like the Patriots in the 2018 team, right? That last Super Bowl they won. Very different recipe from what we saw earlier in the dynasty, but I think still equally capable of winning. So, all right, let's move on, Justin, to the Saturday night game. This was like the real shocker of the weekend. For me, I thought Detroit would win this game. When I look back after a few days have passed from this game on Saturday night, and I still believe Detroit could have and should have won this game, could have and should have made a run to the Super Bowl. Let's face it, this was set in motion. What happened Saturday night in Detroit was set in motion. The second that Aiden Hutchinson went out with a season-ending injury of his, I think it was his Achilles, whatever it was. Okay, he is one of the best players in the NFL, and you cannot dismiss the impact that losing him had on that Detroit team.
Yeah.
And they finally got into a situation where they needed to rely on their defense just a little, where they just couldn't completely outscore the opponent. They made just enough mistakes on offense that they needed some backup from the defense. And that defense wasn't there. And it wasn't there because Aiden Hutchinson wasn't there.
I mean, I agree. I want to give credit to Jaden Daniels, that Commanders team, because I mean, boy, is he impressive. I mean, he continues to get better every week. That team gets better every week. I mean, they are so overperforming what I think everyone thought they were capable of. You just have to give them their flowers and respect it. But with that being said, as good as Jaden Daniels and the Commanders are, that should have been a handed win for the Detroit Lions last week. And to your point, that defense was not in tip top shape. I think sometimes sometimes you just, I think, look past the team. Like, you talk about this Lions team and their culture and Dan Campbell and how good they are at what they do, but you just wonder if they were looking past the Commanders and you're looking ahead to the NFC Championship.
See, I think it was the opposite, to be honest with you. I think it was actually the classic case of a team playing with a ton of pressure on them versus a team playing with nothing to lose. The Commanders were playing with nothing to lose.
True.
Detroit had how much pressure on them? 70-something years of failure and loss and expectation. Very similar to what we've talked about with the Bills before. And I just think they played very tight under the weight of those expectations. I thought the quarterback played tight.
Yeah.
Obviously, he turned the ball over. It might not be his strength to deal with those situations. I think we've seen that throughout his career. And I think it was the opposite. I think that the Lions actually played very tight, and that really hurt them.
It did hurt them. And, I don't want to get over dramatic here, but is the Lions Super Bowl window closing? Like, did they blow the two best chances they've had? I mean, you think about it, you got a 17-point lead in the NFC Championship game last year. This year, you got the number one seed coming off a bye week, going against a perceived much weaker opponent. You blow it. Like, you lose Aaron Glenn, your defensive coordinator. You lose Ben Johnson, your OC, two guys who were super, super integral to the success and the culture in Detroit. And you just wonder if these two disappointing ends to the last two seasons, coupled with some of those departures, mounting pressure again, I just wonder if their window's closing a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair question to ask. I don't think it's closed, but I think it's at a crossroads. Right. And I think it could go either way. You can't lose both coordinators and tell me that's not going to have an impact.
Yeah.
And I like Dan Campbell, I really do. But who is the straw that stirred the drink of that Lions offense? It was Ben Johnson.
It was.
So who's going to fill those shoes? I think is a major question for the Lions going forward. There's been a lot of speculation about Jared Goff's future in Detroit and where does he go? And, I like Goff, and I think he's a good quarterback. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. I really believe that. But I think that there's going to be a lot of questions around him going into next year, rightly or wrongly. But I think that, is his time coming to an end in Detroit? Is it time for Detroit to draft his replacement, to look at other quarterbacks, to move on? That's another big question.
Yeah. And we can talk about the fact that defense got overran a little bit last week, but Jared Goff did not play well. Couple of bad turnovers, couple of blown plays. I mean, it's very fair for him to get some of the heat and some of the questions surrounding, his future and what he's actually capable of. And you know what? That's questions that he's going to have to answer. And, you can't shy away from him at this point because they're justified.
Yeah, they are justified, but I would answer that with this, which is what has Jared Goff done or not done that distinguishes him in any way from Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, or anyone else not named Pat Mahomes? He's made and lost a Super Bowl.
Right.
He's lost a conference championship game. He's lost the divisional round of the playoffs. He's turned the ball over in the postseason, and he hasn't come up big when it's counted. I mean, Lamar Jackson, his postseason career is almost the same as Jared Goff, with the exception that Goff made a Super Bowl and Lamar hasn't.
Right.
But Goff faces all these questions now. I really think, look, you have to be fair to the guy. I mean, I think first impressions haunt these players sometimes. Mm-hmm. And Goff has a reputation that he carried with him from LA about who he is as a player. And maybe that's fair to a certain point, because maybe he's not Joe Montana. Fine. But Jared Goff is a damn good quarterback whose resume at this point, 7 years into his career, stacks up against any quarterback in this league not named Pat Mahomes. That's the statistical reality.
I agree. I'm not doubting Goff in terms of his status as a franchise quarterback. I think he is the right quarterback for Detroit. I think you can win a Super Bowl with him, but I do think the criticisms that he's getting, even if they are maybe overblown, I think it's at least fair for them to be raised at this point.
Yeah, it's fair for them to be raised. There's no question. And Goff played so poorly on Saturday night. I mean, so he's earned all the questions. But I just think, look, you could say the same thing about Lamar Jackson, 100%.
Totally.
And you know, I think you got to remember that only one team wins every year. And, you know, if you're that close and you've been that successful in the regular season, you're a couple good breaks away from going all the way. And I wouldn't give up on Goff if I was the Lions.
No, I wouldn't either. Yeah.
What about Jaden Daniels, Justin? Let's talk about him, because I know you mentioned him earlier, but like, this guy has something special about him. And we've been saying it all year, but like, he is just a total winner in every sense of the word. I think this guy is going to define the NFC for like the next decade.
He comes off way above his years. Like he just seems so poised and so mature, you know, on the field, off the field. He just seems so cool, calm, and collected and confident. And, you know, the thing that I love about Jaden Daniels is, you know, is oftentimes you get these dual threat quarterbacks and you really feel like you're sacrificing a little bit of the pocket passer and the pocket presence for that mobility and for that athleticism. I mean, I don't see any of that with this guy. I see a guy where you get the same benefits that you get mobily with Lamar Jackson, and you're not giving anything up on in terms of being, you know, a pocket presence and a pocket passer. I think he's literally the perfect combination of for a quarterback. He's dynamic, but he's still accurate as hell. He's got a great arm. He can sling it. And look, I mean, the guy, there is something to be said, you know, when you're playing in the expectations are low and you're constantly the underdog and no one's really expecting much out of you and your team. And I do think there's something to be said for that. It'd be interesting next year, you know, because he's going to come in with very high expectations, seeing how he responds and performs under that pressure. But just from what I've seen, you know, he's unfazed in the big moments this year. And that tells you that he's got the mental attributes, you know, the stuff we talk about that is so important, the intangibles that a quarterback needs to have.
Yeah, and let's not forget that the Redskins were 4-13 last year.
Yeah.
And really they filled in their roster, they rebuilt their offensive line. They did some good things, but let's not pretend like, you know, that this guy came into like this super team. I mean, he really is the difference.
Yes.
You know, the major difference between the 2023 Commanders and the 2024 Commanders is Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
So, you know, some players just have that it factor. And I think it looks like he has that it factor. Now we'll see what we're saying about him in 5 years. You know, if he flames out in the postseason the next 3 or 4 years, like Lamar Jackson or some of these other guys, maybe it'll be a very different narrative. But it just feels like right now he has that like energy, man. He has that winning energy.
He does. So I'm excited. I think that the NFC Championship is going to be interesting. You know, you got divisional, you got a divisional matchup for the NFC Championship. But all that being said, as much praise as we've given Jaden Daniels, I think the Eagles are going to win fairly easily. I don't know. I mean, that's just, I just think, you know, they have the type of defense that could potentially give them some trouble. They got the run game to exploit that Washington defense. So I do think his Cinderella, you know, run ends this coming weekend, but I think it could be a good game potentially.
I agree. I think the Eagles, let's not forget when the Commanders beat the Eagles like 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts got injured on the third play of the game and never came back. So I think in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts presumably healthy, playing the full game, I really have a hard time seeing the Commanders win that game.
I do too. Yeah.
Let's talk about that Eagles-Rams game, Justin. And to me, you know, actually, you could say this about all the games to a certain extent, but turnovers are so hugely important, especially in these playoff games. And in my opinion, the Rams fumbled the ball twice in the second half of the game. And that's why the Eagles are even in this NFC Championship game, because I thought the Rams kind of outplayed the Eagles in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And if it was not for Matthew Stafford's fumble and Kieran Williams' fumble and the snow, I think the Rams win that game on Sunday in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I think the Eagles honestly did get bailed out. And you know, look, that Rams team is tough. I mean, they got a Super Bowl winning quarterback. They got a great coach. They got some great young talent on both sides of the ball. But you know, you can't make mistakes at this stage of the game. The other teams are too good. You know, sometimes it really does come down to who plays mistake-free football. And when we get into the Ravens-Bills game, the same is going to come up, and we're going to say the same thing about the Ravens and the Bills, right?
And how about the game we just talked about?
Right.
If Detroit goes up 14-3, they don't fumble inside the 10-yard line in the end of the first quarter.
Yep,
they win that game.
Yeah, exactly.
So for 3 of these 4 games, there were a key turnover, a key fumble, completely changed the course of the game.
Right, exactly. Not to go back to harping on the Chiefs, but you talk about why, you know, I like the Chiefs so much. What's one thing they don't do? Turn the ball over and make stupid mistakes, right? So, but anyway, yeah, the turning the ball over, making stupid mistakes, that's the differentiator at this stage of the game. You can't lose the turnover battle and expect to win. The other teams are just too good.
The other story of the Rams-Eagles game from Sunday is the brilliance of Saquon Barkley, who I was just completely wrong about. I did not think it would work. I never really believed in the player. I will 10,000% admit I was dead wrong about that. Barkley continues to show that he is a next-level performer, that he is the franchise-altering running back that he was drafted to be. And I think that it took getting him out of New York and getting him to a real franchise for him to maximize his talents. But now that he is with a legitimate team and good offensive players around him and a good offensive line, let's not forget that, we're able to finally appreciate and see that this guy really is a special player.
He is in, you know, one thing that Saquon has done is, you know, we talked about this, you know, in previous seasons and previous episodes, that the running back has become a little bit overrated and a little bit outdated in terms of you know, their impact on offenses and winning a Super Bowl. We've said that, you know, you can plug and play a lot of guys into systems or you know, use a committee. The whole bell cow back is kind of been fading, both in terms of like use and significance, but like Saquon is making me realize that there are still some game-changing running backs out there that are every bit as important to Super Bowl runs and success and being dominant. You know, I mean, if you ask me who the most important player was in this Eagle offense right now, I wouldn't say Jalen Hurts. I wouldn't say AJ Brown. I would say Saquon Barkley, and that's
no question.
You know
about
what I mean?
That.
And
no question about it.
But that totally flies in the face of everything that we've thought in terms of how the game has been evolving over the last few years. So like, he really is the outlier, and he's showing that if you do have a special enough talent at running back, they can still be the X factor.
I think it's a little bit the pendulum swinging back though, which is that, like, you know, teams' defenses have gotten so small and so light that, you know, now it is possible again to have a franchise caliber running back actually be impactful in terms of like winning games. And I think it was Derrick Henry too this year was another great example of that, where, like, you know, these special next level running backs now sort of made a little bit of a renaissance, I feel like, with both Henry and Barkley, and kind of proved that running back is still a relevant position in this sport.
It is. And you know, you mentioned it, you know, one of the weaknesses in the Commanders game is the defensive line and stopping the run. One of the weaknesses in the Buffalo Bills game is stopping the run. So, you know, he could really be the X factor, not only this coming week, but in a potential Super Bowl matchup as well. Like, he may be the guy that the Eagles have to lean on, and use Jalen Hurts and the rest of that offense as almost like supplementary pieces to him.
I mean, one of the real questions for these next 2 games for the Eagles is, can they win passing the ball the way they've been passing the ball? Because let's face it, you look at that passing game and it still looks out of sync. Mm-hmm. I think they threw for 36 yards to their wide receivers against the Rams. You know, there's something that still looks like off about Hurts and A.J. Brown and the whole thing with that passing offense, I'm not sure if it's going to matter the way Barkley runs the ball. But I think it's the big question hanging around that Eagles team is, can they win when they're that out of sync in their passing game?
And, it's luckily for them, they're going up against a little bit of a softer secondary.
Absolutely.
But, regardless of who they face in the Super Bowl, if they get there, whether it's the Chiefs or the Bills, those are two good secondaries, especially if it's the Chiefs. So, if you can't pass the ball effectively and, move the offense in a different way, you can't be one dimensional. Like, you cannot be one dimensional and beat the Kansas City Chiefs, right? You could potentially be one dimensional and beat the Commanders, but you're not going to go into a Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes and just run the ball all game and think that's going to be enough.
I'll answer my own question. They can 100% beat the Commanders without passing the ball.
Right.
Like, I don't think they can win against either Buffalo or Kansas City unless they throw the ball some.
Yes.
But I mean, I believe they can beat the Commanders 100%.
Right.
With getting next to nothing from their passing game.
Right. Exactly. So maybe you, look, maybe I don't know what's more important, getting their passing game on track or securing that spot in the Super Bowl, but I think you have some options next week against the Commanders, because if you did decide to play conservative, you can get away with it. And but you just got to be ready to go 2 weeks after that when you go up against, two of the better teams and defenses in the league. All
that said, if Jaden Daniels goes off again, which I'm not expecting that's going to happen against Philadelphia in Philadelphia, but if that happens again, watch out. They might be in trouble.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about the last game of the century, Bills-Ravens. Lamar Jackson has taken a ton of heat this week for another postseason loss. I thought he balled out on Sunday night. I know he had the turnovers. Obviously, you can't do that. A ton of pressure put on him. There's clearly something to his game where maybe he tries to do too much in those critical points. He turns the ball over. Fine. We'll talk about him in a second. John Harbaugh deserves way more criticism than what he's gotten this week for what happened in Buffalo on Sunday. You answer me, Justin. How do they go into that game and the way they were running the ball against the Bills and only give the ball to Derrick Henry 16 times? How do you do that as a coach? I thought that was a huge mistake. I thought it was a boneheaded decision by Harbaugh to go for 2 in the third quarter of that game and chase that point there, which was totally unnecessary. There's a full quarter of football left. Losing that extra point cost them a chance at overtime. It was a knucklehead decision by Harbaugh. An experienced coach like that should know better. And then the play they ran on that first 2-point conversion, how do you not give the ball to Derrick Henry? They ran the ball for 10 yards a clip to get into the end zone, and then you throw the ball in that spot. 3 horrible decisions in a row, all around the same time. I thought that really cost the Ravens more than anything.
It did. I mean, look, the Ravens nearly escaped, Buffalo with a win, and they made poor coaching decisions. They made bad mistakes. They turned the ball over. I think the Ravens really were the better team. They were the more talented team, but they didn't play the best this past weekend. They, like you said, they had dumb turnovers. They made dumb decisions, and you can't win games. You can't win games like that because your opponent is too good. You're playing Buffalo in Buffalo. And you know what? Even though Josh Allen and the Bills still have something to prove, they're good enough that if you go into their house and you make those mistakes and turn the ball over that many times, they're going to find a way to beat you.
Don't you think, though, that Buffalo deserves a little bit of credit for the turnovers, too? Because they've actually been doing that all year. They've been positive in the turnover differential 21 straight games, which I think is some kind of record. They've led the league in turnover differential all year long.
Yeah.
So, what they did on Sunday, forcing those 3 turnovers from the Ravens, that's not totally a fluke. And it's not totally the Ravens screwing up. Like, there is an element of that is just Buffalo doing what Buffalo has done for the last few years. And I think that it can be easy to glance over that kind of stuff, but I think the Bills deserve a lot of credit for playing the game the way they play, forcing turnovers like they've done all year. That were really the difference in that game.
I don't want to take it away from the Bills. they weren't the better team, but they played better. Like they did, like what you said, they won the turnover battle, which is huge. And I got to give a lot of credit to Josh Allen, because Josh Allen has kind of transformed himself. Like, Josh Allen of old would have tried to do way too much in that game and made stupid mistakes and made costly turnovers and decisions. But he has just been fantastic lately, and not only fantastic in terms of his performance, but fantastic in terms of his decision making. He has really sacrificed his, his gun ho, wild approach that oftentimes is what kind of landed him in trouble or earlier in his career, for this more reserved, refined approach to the game. And sometimes it means he doesn't pass for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, but it also means that he doesn't make costly mistakes that cost his team the game.
I mean, Allen's a beast. There's no question about it. I would go so far as to say he's the best player in the NFL, certainly the best player remaining in the playoff field. And I think that's why the Bills are going to have a distinct advantage, regardless of who they play, both the Chiefs this week or if they win to make it next week. I mean, I just think Allen is so good. How about this, Justin? The Bills ran for 150 yards against the best running defense in the NFL. The Ravens were the best running defense in the NFL going into that game. The Bills played their game, right, and ran the ball. So that's what Buffalo's been doing all year. They've been running the ball, and they've been forcing turnovers. And that's what they did on Sunday. Now, the question becomes this week against a very savvy, very playoff experienced Chiefs team that does not turn the ball over hardly ever. You could have said the same thing about the Ravens, by the way, going into Sunday. They didn't turn the ball over either. Are the Bills going to be able to play that game against a really good defense and a team that doesn't turn the ball over historically all that much?
Well, that Ravens defense, I mean, they've been, I think that stat's a little misleading. I know they've been better of late, but they were a little shaky at the beginning of the year, right? They've had their shortcomings at times. But I want to, you go back to that stat, 150 rushing yards. I almost think you have to give that credit to Josh Allen, because I think this team was fully expecting Josh Allen to come in and sling it and try to beat them through the air. And they may have over-prepared to protect against that passing game. And they may have totally just slept on the fact that James Cook is a decent running back. And that running game was really the difference. I mean, you talk about Derrick Henry versus James Cook, who's got the advantage. You'd think all day it's Derrick Henry, but James Cook came out and he balled. And I just don't think the Ravens were ready for it.
Yeah, and don't forget Josh Allen's running too, because that was I feel like as much a factor as his arm was his legs and picking up some huge first downs.
Right.
Okay, so last question. We talked about the Lions championship window being closed. Is the Ravens championship window closed? This is a team that's been knocking on the door for like 5 years now.
I mean, this was the best chance that they've had. I know it hurt them not having Zay Flowers for that game. I think that's something that people aren't talking about enough. I mean, he was that X factor in that passing game and in that offense. Not having him was big. But, as good as Derrick Henry is, as well as he takes care of himself, as ageless as he seems to be, it's tough to think that he's going to be as dominant again another year from now as he was this year. It's tough to think that this Ravens team is going to be able to do it all again. I don't know. I mean, I still think they'll be good. I think they'll be competitive. But I don't know. It seems like that window is starting to close too. I don't want to rule them out, but I think this was their year to make a statement. And I think it's going to be very tough to replicate it.
I read a stat this week that the Ravens over the last 7 years have the best record over a 7-year time span of any team in NFL history that did not make a Super Bowl. So over the last 7 years, they've won more games than any other team that hasn't made a Super Bowl in NFL history. I think that's really telling.
It is really telling for sure. But you know what? Look, it's not rocket science. When your quarterback turns it over in the playoffs, when you make dumb coaching decisions, when you just and not even just the quarterback. Cause I mean, look, Mark Andrews probably had the worst game of his life. Like,
yeah, totally.
So it's like,
how do you figure that? A guy that like doesn't fumble and has like surefire hands.
Seriously.
It just doesn't make sense.
It didn't make any sense. But you know what? That's really the difference is like this team, they've been really good in the playoffs, but I mean, I'm really in the regular season, but come the playoffs, they just have these issues. I mean, it goes back to even a few years ago when Vrabel and the Titans went in and beat them during Lamar's first MVP season, when they were the number 1 seed and they looked like an unstoppable wagon. You know what I mean? So this is a team that is starting to kind of creep into that, that lasting reputation of just not being able to get it done in the playoffs, being a different team in the playoffs than they are in the regular season. And you can't win and make Super Bowls when you do that. You got to be consistent.
Yeah, I think I don't want to say that the window is shut, to be honest with you, because I think as long as you have Harbaugh and Jackson and they got some weapons on the team, it's plug and play from that point. But it's hard to always lose devastatingly in the postseason and then pick yourself back up, have another great season and then only to have it happen again. Eventually, I think that kind of takes its toll.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, we've had the same conversation about the Bills, right? The Bills and the Ravens. And you know what? That's why I think it was so unfortunate that the Bills and Ravens had to get matched up in the divisional round because the two teams are almost identical in terms of their situation. Like super talented, been successful, knocking at the door for the last few years, franchise quarterbacks that are MVP worthy, and they just have not been able to get over the hump in the playoffs. One of them had to, one of them was going home. It stinks that they got matched up that early, but look, they're in the same boat in my eyes,
Well, they are in the same boat. And I agree. It was unfortunate that they ended up matching up against each other in the postseason because, it was like, it really just put both of them in like a very tough spot. And it was an extremely even game. I think those were two evenly matched teams. I think if you play that game 100 times, it's going to be 50-50.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, look, you can say that the Ravens were one or two mistakes away from winning that game. So, it's a tough loss, but I expect that they'll be back. I expect that they'll probably be in the playoffs again next year and they'll get another shot at it. We'll see.
Let's talk, Justin, about our Super Bowl picks before we wrap this thing up. Why don't you give me yours first? We're down to a Final Four here. Who's going to be playing in 3 weeks in New Orleans?
It's to me the least interesting matchup, but I think it's going to be the Eagles and the Chiefs. It's the match we've already seen it. I think we're sick of these teams. I think the Commanders in the Super Bowl would be a great story. I think the Bills in the Super Bowl would be a great story. But you know what? Look, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me multiple times, shame on me, right? And I've said it from day one. Josh Allen and this Bills team, they're phenomenal. I got to give them all the credit in the world. But history tells me that they're going to go into Arrowhead and the Chiefs are going to find a way to come out on top. And until the Bills do come out on top, I have to stick with that. I can't go against. I'd feel like an idiot, if I completely flew in the face of everything that history has showed us between these two teams. Not saying that the Bills can't win, but how can I go against the Chiefs at this point? I'm going to take the Chiefs. I'm going to take the Eagles, and I'm going to take the Chiefs over the Eagles.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, if I was thinking coldly rational, I would agree with everything you just said. The Bills have the better quarterback. I think Allen is playing much better than Mahomes this whole season. The team with the better quarterback, when the teams are roughly evenly matched, should have the advantage. And my head would like to say to pick Buffalo, but the reality is, not my head, but just if you're looking at it from afar, you'd say Buffalo. But when you look at the intangibles, how can you pick against the Chiefs at home? They just don't lose games like this. They haven't lost all year. They haven't lost these games in the last 4 or 5 years, really, with one exception to Burrow. I want to pick Buffalo so bad. I'll be rooting for Buffalo, but I think it's Kansas City for sure out of the AFC. I just feel like that team of destiny thing continues to come up, and they're going to find a way to win this game one way or the other. So I'm going Chiefs out of the AFC, but I'll be rooting Bills. And then in the NFC, I just don't see any way the Commanders can beat the Eagles team. I think that the Eagles almost beat them a few weeks ago on the road with their backup quarterback. I think they were schlepping Kenny Pickett out there at one point. So I think with Hurts there, even though that Eagles passing game hasn't been great, I still think that it's going to be really hard for the Commanders to stop that running game. I think the Eagles take control. I think Jaden Daniels will make some plays in this game, and I think he'll keep it close. Yep. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I'm going to say maybe like a 35-24 Eagles win in the NFC. And in the AFC, I'm going to go like 24-20 Kansas City or something like that, with Kansas City finding a way to eke it out.
Yep. I totally agree. I think the Bills-Chiefs game will be a great game. I just got to give the edge to Kansas City. I think the Eagles are a perfect matchup to stop the Commanders in their tracks. So you know what? It's the matchup, like I said, that I want to see the least. But it's just what my brain is telling me we're going to get.
It's the Super Bowl matchup nobody in America really wants, except for Philadelphia and Kansas City. Nobody wants to see Chiefs Eagles again. But I agree with you. It's likely happening.
Yeah, totally. But you know what? I think to your point, I'm rooting for the Bills. I'm going to be a Bills fan this weekend. Not only would I like to see Josh Allen and the Bills and that fan base kind of, get that shot that I think they deserve, but obviously as Patriots fans, we don't want to see Mahomes and the Chiefs three-peat. So my heart's going to be with the Bills, but my brain and my wallet are going to be with the Chiefs.
I think a lot of Patriots fans are rooting for the Bills, and I think it's more than just the fact that they're rooting against the Chiefs. I think there are legitimately Patriots fans that feel like, it'd be nice to see Buffalo win. They kind of deserve it. Have great fans. Have had a long run of inferiority. This is their time. Kind of those people that grew up in my generation watched them lose 4 Super Bowls in a row, and that was just heartbreak for them. So, and they really haven't sniffed this spot again until the last few years, where they've kind of found themselves back right at near the top of the mountain. I think a lot of us feel like, they kind of deserve it, that it would be, easy to root for, frankly, but I will certainly be rooting for them on Sunday. I can say as one Patriots fan. All right, anything else, Justin, before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's it. It was it's going to be a good weekend of championship football, and I think unless anything crazy happens, I think we have a good idea of how things will shake out. But you know what? That's what's exciting is I'd love to see Jaden Daniels make a statement, that Commanders team. I'd love to see the Bills get to a Super Bowl. So we'll see. Anything can really happen at this point.
I'll be rooting for Commanders Bills.
Yeah.
And I know you will be too.
Yes, definitely. And both teams are still good enough that anything can happen. You can't write either of them out.
Yeah. Well, it's the conference championship game. Right. So crazy things have happened before.
Exactly.
So let's see what happens. But we'll get right down to the end here, and then we'll be back on Monday night to break Tuesday next week to break down everything that happened in these 2 games and lead us to the Super Bowl week, and we'll see what matchup we get.
Perfect. Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right, man. Want to thank everyone that listened to this edition of the Dr. Football Ultimate Patriots podcast. Hope you all have a great week. It is bitterly cold in New England. If you are in New England, stay warm wherever you are. Hope you enjoyed this edition of the show. Have a great week, and we will catch you all next week with another episode. I am not sailing anywhere next week, so I can say with confidence, barring some unforeseen circumstance, we should be here to record again next week. Have a great week, everyone.